Top Democrats say Joe Biden is still their man, despite the leader's shaky performance last week at the first presidential debate.
They have ruled out replacing President Biden as their nominee for the U.S. presidential race, urging party members to instead focus on beating Donald Trump. Mr. Biden stumbled and was halting at times. His voice was hoarse, reportedly suffering from a cold. The questions about his fitness at 81 years of age has dogged his campaign. His debate delivery sparked suggestions for a younger candidate to replace him.
Since the debate, Mr. Biden has gone on a rally blitz. He's held 7 rallies across 4 states. He felt that he did well in the debate, though he admitted to supporters that he's no longer a young man, so his movements are not as smooth. Admissions were widely seen as damage control. Mr. Biden has now retreated to Camp David to be with his family. One Democratic leader says the president will have his comeback moment.
But editorials in some key newspapers say that he should give up. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution wrote, "The shade of retirement is now necessary for the president." It said that he should withdraw for the good of the nation and that he served so admirably for half a century. And the New York Times is blunt in its editorial, saying that he should leave, calling it too big a bet to hope that Americans will overlook or discount Mr. Biden's age and infirmity. That see with their own eyes, that is. Now, we are joined by Clayton Allen, who's the director of the United States at Eurasia Group. He joins us now. Clayton, we know that President Biden and his team spent the weekend in a full-blown effort to contain the damage. Can the president bounce back from his recent debate performance?
Thank you for having me on. And the answer is yes. There is absolutely time for the president to recover. We're still quite a ways from the actual election, still 4.5 months out. And at this point, it's still very much anyone's game. There's every opportunity for Biden to do some damage control, as you noted, and there's every opportunity for the Trump campaign to suffer its own headwinds. That said, in the wake of this week's debate or last week's debate, we do see a greater chance that President Trump will ultimately be victorious. Eurasia Group has Trump at 70% odds to win the presidency and President Biden at 30% chance to be reelected.
Clayton, I want to ask you about what the Biden team has been saying about the debate. They're calling it a blip, first of all. Nothing to see here, quote unquote. Axios also reporting at the same time that, Biden gets fatigued during long days that go beyond 4 p.m. I'm wondering if voters are going to accept that. Do Americans expect their presidents to be there 24/7 or at least, give the impression that they're there all the time?
I think that the latter is more true than the former. People in the U.S. expect that the president is there, or at least appears to be there, at every waking moment, any moment that a crisis might occur. Remember, some of the most consequential moments in recent presidencies have happened very late at night. The killing of Osama bin Laden, the killing of Qasem Soleimani under President Trump, and certainly things that have happened under Biden's own tenure. This is not an occupation. It's not a job for someone who is incapable or perceived as being incapable of having the stamina to endure a 24/7 cycle of leading the largest country on the planet.
There's some Democrats and newspaper editorial boards, they still don't seem convinced. They think that Mr. Biden should leave the race and that there are Democratic leaders out there better equipped to present clear, compelling, and sort of energetic alternatives to a second Trump presidency. I mean, would you agree? If so, then who?
So I think that there's a few things at play here. You're seeing people advocate for alternative candidates based on the presumption that they would be stronger, that youth here would outweigh any perceived negative of untested, unproven candidates. I think that the Biden camp would tell you that the president is the only person to have defeated President Trump in a general election, that Biden has the clear mandate of a majority of the party, and that he's the only actor capable of unifying the various factions of the Democratic Party. To replace him at this point is a difficult proposition. The candidate who would replace him would be appointed, not elected. They would not have gone through the primary process, and in doing so would ultimately dissuade a large portion of the Democratic base. There's a lot of factions that make up the Democratic Party. If you appoint someone to replace Biden, you've disappointed everyone that didn't have their person chosen to be the relief pitcher. That's not a good place to be in as a party. It fractures unity, and it ultimately is a major headwind heading into the general election. For that reason, I think that the Biden camp would argue that there's not an easy chance to replace him. We agree. We put a 15% chance on Biden leaving the race, and the only way to force him out really is if he chooses to drop out.
Clayton, Joe Biden seems to have, in some ways, acknowledged or embraced, his age in subsequent rallies over the weekend. Can you tell us whether this is actually going to make a difference to voters as they assess his performance, and again how they might want to vote 4.5 months from now, or whatever that date actually is?
Certainly. I don't know that we can say definitively that it will or will not be effective. This is a new attack. It's a new issue for a president to face. The level of media scrutiny placed on presidential candidates today is far in excess of what might have been expected under President Reagan, the last president for whom age was considerably a factor in reelection. Biden's attempts over the weekend, or his efforts to sort of make this into a non-issue, to address it and then defer from it, I think have been somewhat effective in deterring criticism from within his party. There's certainly a greater sense now that there's not a major move afoot to immediately try to force him from the race. And again, there's no one who can convince him to do that. It's only Jill and Joe Biden who are going to decide if he remains in this race.
In Clayton, with another debate scheduled for September, some are arguing Mr. Biden should not participate, try to avoid chances of making more mistakes, while there are others who think that his campaign should be more aggressive, hold more rallies, speeches, and interviews. What's your take on what their game plan should be going forward?
So I say this completely as an outside observer. I'm in no way working with either campaign. I have no real inside knowledge into what his advisors are telling him at any given moment. We can only guess at what we hear from others in DC and what we think would be the best course. I would say that leaning into the issue and trying to do more public appearances, especially if he can repeat his performance from his rallies over the weekend, probably is a net positive. In terms of the second debate, I think the real question will be once we start to get polling results back in the next 2 weeks from the previous debate, seeing if there was an impact, especially on swing voters in some of the most crucial states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. If those numbers have moved on the back of this debate, or if they've moved negatively for Biden, I think that's a major disincentive to participation in a second debate, and maybe he'll focus more on one-off events that highlight him as a candidate.
Okay, so Clayton, that's the Biden perspective in a manner of speaking. What about the Trump perspective? What do you see the Trump team and campaign doing?
So the Trump team came into this debate needing to do exactly one thing, and they did it quite well. They needed to keep Trump from repeating some of his more negative performances from 2020, when he appeared at times petulant, disrespectful to other candidates and moderators. He achieved that. He was controlled. He was well-spoken, calm for about 80 of the 90 minutes of that debate. For the Trump camp, they're focused on repeating that performance. If Biden stays in the plan, goes to the next debate, that's exactly what President Trump will be looking to do again. Beyond that, Trump is trying to garner public support, holding rallies, as he does constantly. He's also looking to try and reframe his legal troubles as persecution from a politically motivated DOJ. And he's having some effectiveness at doing that, certainly for his base. So he's going to stay to that game plan.
Eric Clayton, thank you very much for your time and your insight this morning. We've been speaking to Clayton Allen, Director of United States at Eurasia Group.